Three-wheeled cars. They've never really caught on, have they? But that has never stopped major manufacturers and startups alike from trying, or Polaris Slingshot owners from inflicting their tastes on the rest of us. For nearly 140 years, we've seen every variation. One wheel in front, one wheel in back, one wheel on the side, motorcycle-like, car-like, even plane-like. So why do companies keep trying this? Is it a gimmick? Is it a loophole? Or do they think they know something that companies like Mercedes, BMW, and Reliant did not? Today, I'm going to take you through the best and worst of three-wheeled vehicles and why, no matter how many problems they have or how ridiculous they look, you will keep seeing them pop up again and again. A few months ago, we reported on a massive pile of junked three-wheeled EVs in an Arizona scrapyard from a failed startup called Electromechanica. This is just one example of the many companies that have tried to get people excited about one fewer wheel, but the basic idea of a three-wheeled vehicle is actually nothing new. In fact, it's the oldest idea in the book when it comes to cars. This is the Benz Patent Motorwagen, and for 600 Imperial German marks, it was the first production automobile on the market in 1885. It used a 1-liter single-cylinder engine that made 2/3 of a horsepower, and most importantly, it had 2 drive wheels in the back and 1 smaller wheel that did the steering up front. The Motorwagen stayed in production for 8 years, but in 1894, Carl Benz moved on to the Benz Velo, which had 4 wheels. This is real innovation, folks. Now that the vehicle had been upgraded to an impressive 12 miles an hour top speed, Benz had run into the first problem with three-wheelers. When you steer in any vehicle, inertia wants to keep carrying the vehicle forward. If you only have one wheel at the front doing the steering and a high center of gravity, then at high speeds, turning the wheel just means you're going to go over it, not actually turn. Two-wheeled vehicles like bicycles and motorcycles combat this by leaning, offsetting the center of gravity towards the direction you're turning. But in a three-wheeled vehicle, you can't tilt. Although, that hasn't stopped some companies from going bankrupt trying to make that happen. And nearly 100 years later, we were apparently still learning the same physics lesson. In the 1980s, a US federal judge banned the sale of three-wheeled off-road vehicles after more than 1,000 deaths were reported in a 5-year stretch. The Honda ATC was the biggest culprit, especially since it had versions with no suspension being marketed, or at least purchased, as kids' toys. Plus, the riding position gave you all the stability of a Warner Brothers movie deal. And of course, this issue was highlighted in one of the most famous Top Gear segments of all time, when Jeremy Clarkson repeatedly rolled a Reliant Robin around town. Turned out the team had messed with its differential to make it more likely to flip, but make no mistake, it didn't take much. Clearly, the appeal of three-wheelers has never been that they're safer. But there have been many times where they've been cheaper, which, by the way, is still the case in certain developing markets like Southeast Asia, where auto rickshaws have been a thing for decades now. Anyway, right after World War II, Europe was a mess, and everyone was looking for ways to pinch pennies in a world that was quickly becoming more car-reliant. Bikes, motorcycles, and scooters, those were all useful, but what about bad weather? Or if you wanted to take your whole tiny family into town? These conditions created the boom of the microcar, which lasted through the 1950s. Extremely small and fuel-efficient, microcars quickly became a popular choice in places like the UK, Italy, and Germany. And to keep the footprint small and costs low, more than a few went with a three-wheeled setup that solved a major problem. One of the most iconic tiny cars of all time is the BMW Isetta, first built by Iso in Italy, who then sold the tooling and license to BMW in 1954. For those looking for an economic solution regardless of comfort, the tiny Isetta's 9.5 horsepower single-cylinder engine delivered 94 miles a gallon, and with an MSRP of a little over $1,000, it was one of the cheapest options on the market overall. The 700-pound bubble car was incredibly popular, and BMW sold over 160,000 units worldwide, which is more than double the number of M2s BMW has sold ever. The Isetta solved the tip-over problem of previous three-wheelers by having its single wheel in the rear instead of the front. It was by no means the first car to do this, but it was one of the first hugely commercially successful examples of what was by then known as the tadpole layout. One of the pioneers of the tadpole layout was Morgan. That Morgan, who showed off their first three-wheeler way back in 1911. but it actually stopped making them in the early 1950s and took a 60-year break until bringing back the three-wheeler as a heritage-focused model in 2011. But back to the 1950s, the very first mini hatch hit the market, seemingly proving that you didn't have to remove a wheel to make a small, affordable runabout. The Isetta eventually swapped the single rear wheel with two closely spaced ones to further improve stability. But still, the three-wheeled Isetta and other tripods remained popular in the UK. So what was propping up the three-wheeler market there? Certainly not a fourth wheel. Many governments didn't and still don't require three-wheelers to meet the same safety regulations as normal cars. At the time in the UK, they were basically allowed to be registered as three-wheeled motorcycles. This made them cheaper on road taxes, cheaper on insurance, and easier to get a license for. For most of the 20th century, Brits only needed a motorcycle license to be able to drive a three-wheeled Isetta. But if that exact same vehicle had four wheels, you needed a full driver's license. Basically, the UK made licenses super easy to get after World War II, then made the test progressively harder while the requirements for motorcycle licenses stayed relatively unchanged. When the Isetta was popular, only 50% of people were passing their driving tests. But for motorcycle licenses, you could basically stumble out of a pub, pass the DVLA, and get a contact pass. This loophole in the rules was what gave rise to the comical British three-wheelers of the 70s, made by companies like Bond and, of course, Reliant. While we all know about the Tipsy Robin, the Bond Bug was a wedge-shaped three-wheeled go-kart, like if Colin Chapman had a go at making a Reliant. These three-wheelers and many others like them were cheap, easy to use in cities like London, and most importantly, easy to get approved to drive. But eventually, the rules changed, and in 1990, the motorcycle licensing process was replaced with the CBT, or Compulsory Basic Training, which allowed you to operate a motorcycle or moped, but did not qualify you to drive a three-wheeler. And in modern times, this licensing loophole is pretty much gone around the world. Except in Germany, where teen drivers aren't allowed to operate four-wheel vehicles unsupervised until they're 17 years old. But at 16, three-wheelers, fair game. So companies will take economy cars like the Fiat 500 and turn them into bizarre tadpole three-wheelers so 16-year-olds can hit the road by themselves. And you probably don't have to worry about them getting lucky in one either. Elsewhere, since 2015, three-wheelers like the Vanderhall Venice, Morgan three-wheeler, or Polaris Slingshot have been classed in a category called autocycles. All require a Class B license in the UK, basically a full driver's license, and a Class C license in 49 states here. All except Massachusetts, I guess. And in some states, driving a three-wheeler also requires additional motorcycle training or allowances, so it's actually even harder to get licensed. Today's video is brought to you by General Tire. If you're daily driving a light truck, SUV, or crossover, you need a tire that delivers in all seasons and weather. But if you don't want your teeth rattled out by the noise of chunky off-road tires, check out the General Grabber HT. It's built with Duragen technology for solid strength and tread life, but runs quiet for commuting and road trips. Get superior traction on wet and snowy roads and low road noise with a set of Grabber HTs. Available now for a huge range of wheel sizes from 15s to 22s. Find more details and your local dealer at generaltire.com. So these less practical, less safe vehicles are now also less convenient. Why are Vanderhall, Morgan, Polaris, Can-Am, and others still making them? Well, it is still about loopholes. But loopholes for them, not for you. While you may need a driver's license to drive them, autocycles don't have to meet the same safety standards as cars. Here in America, as far as the NHTSA is concerned, autocycles are still motorcycles. So that means safety testing and things like airbags and crumple zones are not required. Not so great for the driver, but great for an automaker looking to keep costs low. We've seen dozens of small companies try and exploit this with varying degrees of success. The Electromechanica Solo I mentioned earlier was a one-seater economy EV pitched as a cheap alternative to a gas vehicle, even though it cost $2,000 more than a new Nissan Versa. It also lacked some key features that are standard on the Versa, like ABS and airbags. Also, no crash testing. With all these cost-cutting opportunities and the goal to sell these as fleet vehicles to companies with deep pockets, You'd think this would be a success, as long as employee healthcare doesn't go up too much. But since the launch in 2019, Electromechanica sold less than 500 Solos, almost all of which were bought back in a recall over, quote, loss of propulsion. They basically all sit in that scrap heap in Arizona now. And if you haven't picked up on it yet, the company went bankrupt. On the complete other end of the success spectrum is Vanderhall out of Utah, which makes a few three-wheelers that look like modern streamlined versions of the classic Morgan. Can we call them luxury? I don't know. Like the Solo, the Vanderhall Venice doesn't go through crash testing or have airbags or crumple zones. But unlike the Solo, the Venice is selling. Vanderhall is a private company that doesn't release production numbers, but in 2020 they opened a new manufacturing facility because demand was so high. And the Venice is not cheap. The base model costs 30 grand. And unlike the Solo, which was pitched as a commuter vehicle that would protect you from the elements, the Venice doesn't even have a roof. Buying one is a real commitment to the lifestyle. So what is the secret to success? I think that people who are trying to figure out why three-wheelers exist are looking at them from the wrong side. They aren't cars with less, they're bikes with more. Harley-Davidson trikes have been growing in popularity despite the company's dwindling overall sales. At first, the trikes were bought more by older people or those with disabilities who couldn't comfortably balance a two-wheeled bike. Now they're getting trendy and coming with more amenities, more storage, and modern features like touchscreens.
Because it's different, it's not terrible. For a trike, I mean, it has everything on it. It has everything on it, including heated grips.
It's for people who want their bikes to be a little bit more car. Autocycles don't need to be as Spartan as motorcycles and can therefore be just a little bit more like your daily driver. The idea is that you can get that motorcycle feel without the drawbacks. Three-wheelers like the Venice, the Slingshot, and the Morgan all give someone with no experience on a bike a taste of that sensation of riding. It's the same freedom, the same openness, and sometimes even the same engine note, but you're sitting in a car seat with a steering wheel instead of handlebars. The reality is the modern three-wheeler is a toy for the well-off who see riding a bike as too much of a risk or a hassle. These are often third or fourth vehicles for buyers. But if you're curious and you find yourself in a state where you can drive one with a regular license and a helmet, it's the easiest way to dip into that unique experience without going through full motorcycle training, getting a bike, and an M1 license. Tourists love them. And for whatever it's worth, I'll take seeing those over a flock of Segways any day. So while they may have their design flaws, licensing issues, and be just as expensive as a normal car, three-wheelers do have a specific niche that they fill. That niche has changed over the years, from being the first real car to the cheapest option to finally becoming the lazy or timid man's way into motorcycles. They've gone through many changes, and with the advent of EVs, I'm sure they'll be reimagined again, despite some recent high-profile failures. The one thing we can say for sure is that they are not going away anytime soon. That's all for me this time. I hope you had fun with this video. Be sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in 2 weeks with another one. Thanks for watching.